Welcome back to the Time for Heroes podcast. On the podcast this week, I have Mark Morris, frontman of the Bluetones, and in later years, he's done a lot of solo stuff. Mark was a big influence in me in the Britpop era when his band came out. So we're going to touch on his full career and what he's up to now. But before we do that, we're going to get back to the start. What was life like for you, Mark, growing up?
It was all right, really. I grew up in Hounslow, which is a suburb west of London, near to Heathrow Airport. So it was a town that didn't have high unemployment, largely because everyone works at the airport. So it was a town that had it was quite a multicultural part of London at that time, being also thanks to it being so close to this, international gateway. So where I grew up and when I went to school, I always grew up around people from different cultures and different backgrounds, or people that might have been born in other nations or their parents were. And so I think I was quite lucky in that we were exposed to a lot of things at an early age, my brother and I, because we went to the same school, obviously, and knocked around in the same places. And so there was always a lot of opportunity going through my junior school and into secondary school. There was always a lot of opportunity to be involved with music and sports and stuff like that, which was where the facilities were really good, where we at the comprehensive that we went to. So Hounslow at that time, it was just good fun. It's a working class place. So grew up on a couple of council estates. And of course, they're great places to go up because there's always loads of children around. So there's always something to do. There's always someone to hang out with, play football with, or climb a tree with, and all that sort of stuff. So I look back on my childhood very fondly.
There's one of your songs, I think it's on the second album, where you mentioned the reservoir. Is that a place in your childhood, or is that just a fictional?
Oh, it's a fictional place. There was a reservoir relatively near to where we grew up. Where was it? It's near Staines. I can't remember the name of the place. It begins with an L. But there was a big reservoir. The reservoir for us was we used to have this thing. After I'd left home, Adam, Scott, and Ed's, the whole band, we used to share a house together, and it sort of become a meeting place for all of our friends.
Right.
More or less like a youth club. We had a pool table, we had a darts board, we had a games console, and we'd be sitting around. You could smoke weed, etc. So it was a place that all our friends would come to after they finished work or college or whatever they were doing. And every few months, particularly over the summer, every few weeks over the summer, when the weather was nice, we would all congregate ours at about 8 o'clock in the evening and drop some ecstasy and then walk to this park, which is about 3 miles away. And we'd always go to the same spot in the center of this forest where there was a fallen tree and make a camp there until the sun came up and just take our own music and dance through the middle of the night. And that, for us, I suppose, in terms of that particular song, would be this place, this reservoir, this Xanadu.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Because probably everybody growing up has had that sort of thing, that reservoir or whatever it is. We used to get down in the woods. There was a cricket pitch in the middle of the woods. That's where we used to get down. And the same sort of stuff as you're talking about, just all night, camping out and taking hundreds of drugs and stuff like that. And
yes, we didn't have tons of money, so sort of going to clubs and going to bars wasn't an option. And this way, we could also guarantee that we'd like the music, because we'd take our own.
So, were you all kind of growing up together at school then?
No, I didn't meet Adam until just after I'd left home. So I just finished college. I took a year off after college doing my A-levels, and I went back to university for a few months, and then I dropped out and got a job, and I was working at our price, and I left home, and I was living in a shared house with 3 other people, and one of them happened to be Adam, who I'd seen around town before on the scene, because I was in a band at the time, and he was in a different band. And there was this kind of begrudging respect. I was a little bit intimidated by him because he was a very good guitarist at a very early age. And I think he might have been a little bit intimidated by me because my band was better than his. And I always thought he was like, because I'd seen his band a couple of times, and he stood out a mile. And then when we moved in together, we had like, identical record collections. It was just a natural step that we were gonna do something together. He came on board. He joined the band that Scott and I were already in. We were in a band called the Bottle Garden. We were, booking gigs for ourselves at local pubs and that sort of thing. This would have been about 1990 when I was, like 18, going on 19.
Going back a bit then, but when did you find yourself musically? When did you first get guitars, stuff like that? When
was it? Secondary school. I was big into sports for the first few years at school. Football was an obsession. I used to play for several different teams. Like every night of the week, I'd either play in a game or training. And then I got an injury when I was about 14. Fell out of a tree. Right. And so I couldn't play football for a year. And so I had to kind of really change my whole social circle at school, because I'd be playing football at every break time, every lunchtime. After school, I'd go home, get changed, go and play football on the green. And I couldn't do that anymore. And I started hanging out in the music department instead, rather than go and watch all my mates play and feel low because I couldn't join in. And I met a whole different group of people, or the school band, essentially, all the kids in school who had like a bass guitar and an electric guitar and a drum kit and that sort of stuff, or used to school drum kit. And from there, I just started messing around with a guitar. And one day, this music teacher walked past and said, "Oh, I didn't know you played guitar, Mark." And I said, "Well, I don't." And he said, "Well, you've got a very natural strumming action." And for me, that was all I needed to hear. It was like, right, I better get some lessons then. So that's when I started to take guitar lessons, and when I got my first acoustic guitar. And it was, when I say guitar lessons, it was never like reading music or learning to write music correctly. It was, I'd just take a cassette in and say, "Can you teach me how to play this?" You're taking like the Cult and the Smiths and say, "Can you teach me this lick?" And it went from there, really. And so I was in a couple of school bands that played cover versions. And I always liked being in the school productions and that sort of thing, and getting up and singing a song. But it was after, when I was 15, I had a summer job through the whole of the school holidays. And I was getting paid $5 a day to work on, it was like just like a labourer on a building. So my uncle was working on a site where they were building 2 houses. So I'd go there, get there at 4:30, I'll be able to leave at 8:30 and leave at 4:30. And I'd get a $5, and I saved all my money up over the summer holidays and bought a bass guitar.
Right.
So I had a bass guitar and a little 12-watt Marshall practice amp. And I'd play in the bedroom, and I'd take it to school and mess around with it at school. But I wasn't in a band at that point. And then in April of 1989, I went to see the Stone Roses. They played a gig in London at a place called the ICA. It was a Monday night. And I went with my mate from college and his mate, a guy called Robin, and I'd never met Robin before. But we just hit it off. After the gig, it turned out Robin's in a band and they're looking for a bass player. So I said, "Oh, just so happens I've got a bass guitar." So I joined the Bottle Garden. It was Robin's band. He started the whole thing off. And I joined on bass, and then it became quite evident that the guy that we had on guitar, even though I'd only been playing a few months, was even worse than me. So I said, "I'll tell you what, why don't I play guitar as well, and we'll get my brother to stand in on bass for our practices until we get a bass player." And So that was it. That's how Scott first joined the band. And it was only supposed to be a temporary fix. But he ended up quickly becoming like the best musician in the band.
And was he playing music then as well, or did you teach him bass?
Well, no, it was one of those things because we shared a bedroom. When I wasn't playing with my acoustic guitar, he would be playing it. And he's one of those people who just seems to pick things up real quickly. It seemed to be no real effort for him to do the things that it had taken me months and months to perfect.
Yeah,
So I wasn't teaching him at all. It was my thing, but he was just doing it as a, in those days we didn't have the internet and all these games consoles to keep us occupied. You just be in your room and there's a guitar, might as well mess around with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned like the story, the injury at football, and then that's how you kind of changed course. Obviously, in recent weeks, I've had Andrew Cushion, I've had Damon Manchella, Jack Jones for trampoline. All pretty much the same story. They were all footballers. Obviously, Damon got an injury, broke his leg, picked up a bass guitar because he couldn't do it for 6 months.
Yeah, wow.
Much the same with the Cushion. Pretty much the same with Jack Jones. He met the rest of the band at football practice, and I think most of these as well have started out with bass guitar or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's mental, that kind of link. It comes up so much on the podcast, football, and then football, injury, music.
I think it's also like a reflection on the culture of the time,
Yeah.
For young lads, what did we do? We spent a lot of time outdoors, didn't we? A lot more time outdoors in those days. And what do you do when you're outdoors? You play games.
Yeah.
And you get good at something and it becomes a kind of an obsession.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You do at that young age as well. You do think if you play football at any sort of level, you think, "Oh, I'm going to be a footballer." And the minute that kind of ends, and you think, "Right, I need to think of something else to do
to replace that huge hole in your life."
Yeah,
I need something else to obsess about, and it became, and music was right there.
Yeah.
And I was lucky, like I say, I went to a school that had a really good music department. So you could just wander in and there'd always be people milling about, practicing and playing instruments. And there was always something going on. And there's lots of guitars that you could borrow. So you didn't have to own one. I was very lucky in that regard.
What happened then with the Bottle Garden going forward? Because obviously Robin's not in the Bluetones. So
Robin, it was Robin's band really, and Robin was such a driving force, always full of ideas. But we got to a point as we were moving on where Scott and I were writing more songs, and Robin was the vocalist, and we were finding it harder and harder to write songs that Robin could get into, and he was just moving in a different direction. His was kind of, he was getting into wanted to go sort of more funky and formless,
right.
And we were kind of honing our skills as songwriters and learning about form, the opposite really. And so we kind of just disbanded and got back together. I've since found that this is a common story amongst some bands where you don't want to kick someone out of the band, especially when they started the band. So we just dissolved, and then the other four members got back together without Robin.
Yeah.
And it was fine. We all made our peace. It was difficult for a little while, but after that and since then, it was all fine. It was all understood because he went on and did his own thing.
Right.
Whilst we did ours, and it's just recognised, well, that was just a thing. It's just a thing. It's like our paths were together for a little while and then they moved in different directions. And there's no bad feeling or even guilt on my, at that time you feel terrible, but not now. It was the right for everybody.
Yeah, I mean,
but he was, but it can't be stated enough that were it not for him, I probably wouldn't be in a band. or I've got into a band at that point anyway, because I was so drawn to his energy, his dedication, and it was like, well, yeah, he's serious. That's what you want. This isn't just like a lark. This is I need this level of obsessiveness in my life. You know, I need something to get into.
So,
and
what sort of music were you listening to? Obviously, you mentioned you went to Stone Roses. What were your early musical influences?
Well, I was a pop kid growing up, and I was just, a charts obsessive. So I'd buy lots of 7-inch singles, and I was my favourites of like Duran Duran, and later on I really got into the Pet Shop Boys and things like that. And as a result of the other artists, as a result of liking the Pet Shop Boys, I got more into Depeche Mode and Erasure and things like that at the time. And then this kid at school lent me a cassette of the Smiths. He put Hatful of Hollow on one side, and I can't remember what it was, no, it was just Hatful of Hollow on a cassette. And I was completely blown away by the Smiths, and they opened up again a whole new world of music to me. Independent music, indie music, jangly guitars, leather jackets. And so I was listening to things like the Pale Fountains. The Pale Saints. Remember the Pale Saints? No. Before them, the Mighty Mighty Lemon Drops. No, the Mighty Lemon Drops. I'm thinking of the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. God, my brain is so cloudy. But you could get all these cassettes out of the library, couldn't you, with your library card? So I would just be discovering The Cure and the Mighty Lemon Drops and Sisters of Mercy. And then the Stone Roses came along, didn't they, at the end of 88 and beginning of 89. And they just seemed so like Technicolor compared to everything else I was listening to. And as a result of listening to them and reading their interviews and learning about the things that influenced them, that's when things really started to branch out for me, and I started listening to old records from the 1960s and the 1970s, which I hadn't really done at that point. There's that age when all that music is just old, because I can identify it with it now, because my kids are at a certain age where everything I like is just old. And even the music I make, it's like, your music sounds like old music. So I guess so. And that's when it was around that time that I met Robin, and we, of similar age, well, same age, and we were both having the same sort of musical flowering in terms of our tastes, and this world of what's out there opening up to us, and so we're discovering things like Jimi Hendrix and the Doors and the Buffalo Springfield and Neil Young, and that was around the time that I started to think about writing songs myself,
right?
Or giving it a stab. Well, Scott and I together in the beginning.
So how did that work then? You and Scott writing these songs. What was the process involved with that?
Well, Scott's never really written lyrics, but he comes up with top lines and melodies, and so that's the same today. It's the same way we would work today. He comes in with a chord progression and says, I haven't got any words, but here's the melody, and go da 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 ba 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 across the top, and then I'd have to go away and walk around the estate a few times with my Walkman on, listening to what that afternoon's practice on a cassette, and we just sort of meld our ideas that way. We would literally sit there with two guitars and bash songs out together. Because we were brothers and we were so focused on the same thing, there was quite a sort of telepathic understanding between us. We'd go everywhere and take our guitars with us. I remember sitting down in the tin mines down in Cornwall, this old abandoned tin mine right on the edge of the country, and writing arrangements for some songs that ended up being on the first album. I remember it very clearly, doing it and trying out new chords for a chorus, new chords for an ending, that sort of thing. We were just obsessed. I think you have to be I think it has to be your whole life if you want to make it. You have to, it's more. It was more than just a hobby. It defined us from a very early age. We want to be songwriters.
You sound like, obviously, you and your brother Scott, you seem to have a good relationship. Obviously, as kind of Britpop appeared, and we've got Oasis, two brothers in bands. But then you had Embrace come out probably around about the same time as well, which is brothers in band, which they got on fine, Richard and Danny. And
Mm-hmm.
and you seem kind of, you and Scott seem more the same as them. Obviously, not to go too far forward, but was there, did the media, did the press kind of try and compare you to Oasis at any point with the
Well,
brother?
yeah, a number of times there was the inevitable thing I mentioned of siblings in bands, etc. But our story wasn't as quite as good copy, was it? If you get along, people like to read more about. People like to read about conflict. They like to hear about it. It's sort of, and it shrouds the creative process and even more mystery when the people that are making these things together appear to not get along.
Yeah.
I can understand that. It's not a story, is it?
No, I mean,
It's
there
very
seems to
commonplace.
be
It's more
more and more
commonplace than you
bands.
think.
There seems to be more and more bands, even nowadays. I spoke to a young band from Manchester a few episodes ago, and they're the same. They get two brothers, and again, everybody seems to get on fine.
But
But
it's
everybody just wants that story, as you say, the Liam and Noel stuff, and it doesn't seem to be as prevalent as people think.
I think if you watch like movie credits, for example, when they roll past the stars of the movie and the main producers and whatnot, and you get to the technical departments, wardrobe, lighting, the electricians, you often see lots of siblings
Yeah,
in those teams because it's the same sort of thing. They've grown up together with the same interests and fallen into the same careers. And it's more common than you think.
yeah.
People go into business all the time, don't they, when they're siblings? But it's a better story when it's fisticuffs.
So, what then? Obviously, you were writing your songs and that. How did you go about making demos? Where were you recording?
We we got to a point where we made friends with Dodgy, that band Dodgy, because they lived in Hounslow as well. Even though they're from two of them are from the Midlands. They found themselves in Hounslow, and they were renting a house all together on the same estate as Scott and my grandparents. So we used to see them sometimes when we were walking over there for a Sunday lunch. These hippies hanging outside this, it was the messy house in the street. And but we made friends with them, and eventually, like a room came up to rent in their house, and I moved in, and then they got their record deal, and a couple of them moved out, and Adam moved in, and Scott moved in, and eventually we sort of just inherited this house from Dodgy, and they'd created a space in the garden in the shed that they turned in. Well, it's a garage really that they turned into a rehearsal space. So we inherited that. We cleaned it up a little bit. It was a few years old and a bit damp, so we sort of renovated a little bit. So we had this space and we could make demos in there. And in the early days, Nigel from Dodgy still lived in the house, so he would record us on his 4-track. And some of our early demos recorded by Nigel. And we had a friend who was our who was our front of house guy, and he'd been to school with Ed's, and he would come around and record us on his 4-track. And that's just in the living room, and we just do it in the day so as not to annoy the neighbours too much. And yeah, that's really how we got going. It was like a little cottage industry, but it was another fortuitous thing meeting Dodgy at that time, when their career was just starting to take off, and we were just like apprentices really, playing pub gigs and making our first demos.
What sort of songs came from those demos? Then was there songs on Expecting to Fly? Did they come
Yeah,
from?
Slight Return was one of the very first things that we wrote together. Blue Tonic was the 11th song that we wrote together because it was called Number 11 for a long time.
Right.
Let me think. Colorado Beetle, which was an early B-side, would have made it around that time. Time and Again, Talking to Clary, they were early demos as well. There was Cuts and Rug was quite early. So within the first 20 songs that I think we wrote together, 11 of them made it onto the album.
Right, that's brilliant.
That's not bad. It's not a bad start.
And what was gigging like at this time? Where were you gigging? Just local?
Mostly local. There was a pub in Brentford called the Red Lion, which specialised in putting on gigs, and we'd play there every couple of months, every 2 or 3 months. And then now and again we'd venture into London and play the Bull and Gate or something, but we tried to do it so that we could bring a posse with us rather than just play to an empty room. And you can't always get your pals to come to every gig, so you've got to space them out a little bit. So that's how we did it, and we got spotted, as it were. We got spotted one up when we were playing at the Bull and Gate, of course, we were all living in this shared house. None of us were working. We were all signing on. So we didn't have any money. We didn't even have a phone at the address. No landline. And so about 3 months after we'd played the Bull and Gate, I went down to the phone box to call them up again and see if we could get another gig. And just by chance, the person that picked up the phone remembered us from our last performance and said, "Oh yeah, there's a guy asked you to give him a call after you last played," but there was no forwarding number. So I called him up, and that guy turned out to be our manager.
Right.
In the end, up until 2006, and again, it just feels like a lot of good fortune fell our way, that this guy had seen us and liked us, but that the person who picked up the phone was the person that they'd spoke to initially 3 months prior, and they'd remembered us.
Yeah.
And so from that, he took us over. He took control, or gave us some guidance, rather, should I say, as to what steps we should take, where we should play, when we should play. And then he was busying himself getting people from the industry to come to our gigs. And it was from there that we started to get offered some really nice support slots with other upcoming bands who were like a little bit further in their career. So we started playing with bands like Strangelove. We did a little tour with them. That was really a really good education. They were a nice band to tour with. And we played with Shed 7 a few times when they'd had singles out. I think their LP was just about to come out. We toured with Supergrass. And, you know, through doing that and being able to go around the country and have exposure to sort of new audiences, we started to sort of find one of our own. And there we go. And then record companies started sniffing around because it's like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And
you brought it, Fierce Panda brought it a couple of your early stuff as well. So
that's right. Yeah, that's actually got the demo of Blue Tonic on there. Number 11, it's called on that.
Right.
It didn't have a title.
So obviously, because you mentioned the Bull and Gate, I've had Simon Williams on the podcast. And I think he was running about that era quite a bit.
Yes, that's right. He used to run those nights.
Yeah. So is that where the Fierce Panda comes in? Did he see you there, and how did that?
And Neil, our manager, sort of got into his ear, and he wanted to. Things were starting to. You know that word. There was a bit of a buzz about us, and he was quite keen to get us onto. I think it was his second EP, wasn't it? He'd done one with. Was it Supergrass? Yeah, it was Supergrass. So that's how that came about, really. He booked us, and then when things started to, there's no doubt that was a really key point for us, and it was a great help to our career that he did that.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many bands have kind of started out with Fierce Panda. Obviously, Coldplay and Keane came for their Idlewild
Yeah,
and stuff.
yeah.
I'm pretty sure Ash as well, maybe. Had
Yes, Ash did. Yeah,
So it's amazing when you look at that kind of back catalogue and you think,
that
oh,
hit rate.
to that.
He's like a flipping truffle pig. The way he can sniff
Yeah.
out these bands with longevity.
So how did that then progress after the Fierce Panda releases? What record companies come in?
Started circling, and they were all offering us like demo time, free studio time to go and make some demos. But we were, or our manager was canny enough to make sure that we retained all the ownership of those demos, despite the fact that, say, EMI or Ireland might have paid for it. And we took one of those demos and made a 7-inch pressing. It was like the demo of Slight Return.
Right.
And it got into the hands of John Peel when he played it on his show one night. And that was kind of like a rubber stamp of people are going to listen to you now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
People are going to take you a bit more seriously now. And then it was just a case of, it was a really exciting time. I mean, every gig we played, there would be some record company there to take us out to dinner. And it was a bit dizzying because everyone seemed really nice. Everyone seemed like it was a pretty good deal. But in the end, we went with A&M Records because they were going to allow us to keep our own imprint, which we'd had at that point, which was superior quality recordings.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't going to get too heavy in terms of like the creative directions that we wanted to take. They were going to leave a lot of the big creative decisions to us, which is something in those days you take it for granted. Things like artwork and videos and how we presented ourselves, we were allowed to make our own decisions, which sounds remarkable, but it wasn't as rife as you think.
Yeah. I mean, because there's so many bands at that time as well that there must be so many deals to get signed. There's just so much. So there's so much competition. So for you to be able to kind of keep that control of what you're doing, that it's a big thing, and you want to have the artistic control of.
Yeah, we knew what we didn't want. We knew what we didn't want to do, and the sort of videos we didn't want to make, and the way that our records we didn't want them to look. We had some very strong ideas in those days. And it was quite important that we were able to express them. You know, we had ideas for videos. I mean, for me, that's always been a big part of what being in a band is about. It's not just thinking about the songs and the recordings. It's about still being a fan and sort of wanting to present yourself in a way that makes yourself interesting to retains your audience's interest. Mm-hmm. And it's not just leave it to somebody else. You know, here's the song, here's the album. What about the video? Oh, it doesn't matter. What about the artwork? Oh, it doesn't matter. It's like, no, these things are key.
Yeah.
We can collaborate, but I think it's key that it comes from us.
Obviously, like mentioned, the artwork. Was Scott involved in artwork?
Yeah, he did the artwork for the second album, and then he did the artwork from all the albums from the fourth onwards.
Right.
So the original idea for the first album with the peacock was that we wanted to sort of do a Led Zeppelin style sleeve where you had a peacock and you take out the some of the eyes in the feathers would be missing. And then you take out the inner sleeve and there'd be a portrait of the four of us and our eyes would slide in to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Physical graffiti and all that sort of stuff with the windows. But it was obviously far too expensive to be able to pull that off. And the record company were like, it's a great idea, but it means you're going to make no money from this album. And all the concepts for the artwork for the singles came from the band. The newspaper, the truck, the bee, the sandcastle, all those are, yeah, but they were set up and executed by an art department, but we came up with the ideas for the front and back sleeve. And then on the second record, Scott was like, I might as well just do this myself because I've got some strong ideas about the feel of this record. And so Scott took it on there. And then I think with all the touring and everything that followed that, and then going straight into doing the third album, we came up with a concept together, but we let someone else do it. And Scott just helped with layouts. But then from then on, he's done all the artwork. From Luxembourg onwards. I think that's helped to sort of cement our identity as well in terms of like our visual identity.
Yeah, I mean, it must make you feel comfortable knowing that yous have had to say in what gets released in that kind of aspect. The physical product that's there is something that you wanted. That
look. They're pleased with the way it looks, etc.
Yeah. So obviously expecting to fly, it did fly, didn't it? It went in at number one in the album. So I mean at that time, right in the middle of Britpop. I know people don't like to call it Britpop, but it's easy to kind of, it's an easy kind of
catch-all phrase for that time.
Yeah. But I mean, it was a brilliant time for music. The amount of bands, obviously, we've touched on a few of them: Supergrass, Dodgy, all this, Oasis, blah. There was just so much. All these guitar bands for you to commit like that with a number one album, and amongst all that, how did that feel at the time? Do you think that was you on the road to world domination?
Oh yeah, riches and glory. Well, no, I think the biggest shock came. We were doing some promo stuff ahead of the album in Europe. So at the time, the week Slight Return was released, and Adam and I were going to Germany and Holland and places like that, and just to do radio interviews and whatnot. And we were getting a connecting flight to Amsterdam when we got the midweek for Slight Return. And that was one of those moments where it was like, what, are you serious? Because at midweek it was number 2, and it was like, it's so far ahead of number 3, it's going to stay at number 2. It's not going to catch number 1, because it was Babylon Zoo, which was outselling everyone else like 3 to 1. But it's like, no, you're going to go into the charts at number 2, lads. and it was just one of those, it's like, are you, what? What are you talking about? Yeah, your song, it's gone over big. What? And so that was the shock. And so I think the album was released 2 weeks later. So it wasn't quite such a surprise that the album charted high. It was weird that it went to number 1, but it was the real shock was getting that first, you're going to be number 2 in the singles chart for Slight Return. It was kind of like, what are you talking about? Let me see that. Yeah. This must be some kind of misprint. What are you talking about?
I mean, there must have been, I mean, like, I know at that time, I was buying music, and I think everybody had their favourite band, but I bought everything. I bought every album, you know what I mean? I had yourselves, Cast, everything that came out, because there was just so much. Even I would watch the Lightning Seeds at Glastonbury the other week, and you forget they had, you know what I mean? There was just...
Yeah, I know. I was in the last week. I went down to there's a local ironmongers, and I decided to do some DIY in the garden. And it's only like a little shop. It's a long shop. There's only one guy who works in there, and he was at the other end of the shop just whistling, and I could just tell from what he was whistling that he was whistling the light. I could tell he was whistling the Lightning Seeds. That's how distinctive some of those melodies are. Instantly, like out of tune a guy's whistling out of tune 50 feet away, and it's like, is that the Lightning Seeds? And I got to the till, I said, were you just whistling the Lightning Seeds? He's like, yeah, I love that song.
Yeah. It was just so much, like, every week there was another anthem coming out. Mind you had the compilation albums, was it indie anthems, and it was
and Shine.
the compilations were brilliant, and you could buy them, I think, every 3 months or something. They would bring another, and it would basically like an indie version of now.
Now that's what I call indie music.
Yeah, between the two albums, he brought out Marblehead Johnson as well as a standalone single. I mean, there's not a lot of bands do that.
Yeah.
It's one of the most famous ones, the Oasis, for whatever. So, what was the reason behind that? Did you just did you feel it didn't fit on either of the two albums?
No, it was written afterwards. It was written after the album had been recorded.
Right.
And it was more of a case of, rather than release a fourth single from the album, which the record company wanted to do, we were like, well, why don't we just stick another single that would draw attention to the album? You know, the Beatles used to do it, the Smiths used to do it, and we liked the idea of having these standalone singles. It felt like as artistic statements, they are little things that don't belong anywhere else. And I don't know. I think we wanted to get into the studio again and do something new, rather than just be going around the world miming a song that we knew very well that we've been playing for years. It was, I think a lot of those songs had been hanging around for a while. Like I say, that we've been demoed them years before. So I think we're just desperate to record the next batch, start on the next batch, and then that was 96. In the summer of 97 we went in and started recording the second album, which was quite different. I think we had a sense of some of the songs that were coming were a little bit different as well from the sound of the first record, but there you go.
Well, on the second record, I think is probably your finest song. I love that song. That is like one of my favourite tunes in that era. And I can mind, was it Tea in the Park? The first time I went to Tea in the Park, it was just me and my friend, 2 years. I don't know what age we would have been, 17, 18 or something. We'd never been to a music festival, and we went. Obviously, the tickets would have been, and the tickets only cost about 50 quid or something. I bought the 2 tickets for me and my pal, and we went with a £10 out of pound stretchers, I think about £20, and a packet of peanuts between us, and it pissed down the full time we were there. And obviously, going to a music festival like that with just 2 people, obviously we lost each other, and we found each other at the main stage watching the Bluetones just come on. So that song just like it sticks in my memory for that. And then I think after that you played Mudslide, and obviously at the time Tea in the Park was a fucking riot with the mud and all that.
Yeah.
Seemed so prophetic, but I mean that song If is like my number one Bluetones song. So thanks just for writing that, you know what I mean, for everything else, man. But that's number one for me.
Well, thank you for saying that. It's my pleasure. It's a sweet story. It's a story of survival.
Yeah. And what happened then, every year after that, we went and we just added another friend. So like the next year, the next year was 4 years, to the point where we were trying to lose each other at this point because we were all falling out. But If is number one for me. But the thing with the songs, as you say, it was like the songs were sounding maybe a different. There seems to be a lot of different elements. In the songs, you can have like kind of country type songs or punk songs. So was that like all the band kind of putting their influences together?
Yeah, that is what it is. Yeah, that is. I mean, it's a four-way thing with us. Everything becomes a Bluetones song once everybody's had a go at it. There's not somebody in the band that dictates creative ideas, but you try to. You start out with a strong idea in your head, but then it goes into the room, and someone will create something that you would never thought of. Take a song in a direction that you would never have considered, and go, "Oh, actually, that is better than my idea." And then you move over there, and it becomes like, for example, the Jub Jub Bird. On that, it started off. It was like a 3/4 kind of folky song with a, it was going to be quite acoustic guitar heavy. But then one day Scott just started, he stuck on his fuzz pedal and just started playing that crazy riff over it. It's like, oh no, actually, we'll take it in that direction, I think. It's like that's got more than a little something to it. And that happens all the time. And that's the wonderful thing about being in a band. That's what I've missed since we've last recorded together, is that sort of chance, the opportunity for spontaneity. Because when you're working on your own, you don't have that so much, someone to bounce ideas off of, which I like, which I enjoy as well, having like executive decisions. But I also really love coming out of a rehearsal room, and feeling like, crikey, I did not see it going in that direction, and how the hell did we end up here, in a good way, with a song like that, where you've been hammering away at an arrangement, and then finally it falls into place and it sounds completely different than it did at the beginning of the day.
Because you'd be so hard that you couldn't pigeonhole, you couldn't say this is a Bluetone sound. Like there's certain bands that obviously, you mentioned Oasis quite a bit, but you say there's Oasis, that's Oasis's sound. But Bluetones there's so much different.
Thanks. I think so.
Even within an album, you know what I mean? There's so many different sounds, which for me it makes it's a journey on the album for the listener, because you're listening to so much different styles.
I think that's true of all of our records except for one. I think when we made Luxembourg, we did go in with quite a narrow sort of parameter for ourselves. The rule was like, no acoustic guitars on this album. This is going to be an electric album, no long songs. We're going to keep it snappy and poppy and sort of new wavy. We were listening to stuff from that era, like a lot of things were inspiring us from, like Devo and the Ramones and Squeeze and other bands from around that time. But just and early Elvis Costello records and that sort of thing, that sharpness. So that's the only time we've set ourselves that thing, and it says on the sleeve, it's like no acoustic guitars were harmed in the making of this record. And because I think at that point in our career, or our creative journey, whatever you want to call it, coming off the back of Science and Nature, which was an album which was quite broad in its sort of, we did cherry pick from a few different genres. With that, we were like, let's make a good old, because we're gonna have to tour the shit out of this, so let's make an album we can play every single night, and be thrilled by. So you've got these edgy, lots of downstrokes on the electric guitar.
Obviously, Expecting to Fly, as you say, that came in at number 1. Return to Last Chance Saloon, second album, number 10, and then Science and Nature was top 10 as well, number 7 in the charts. After, obviously, then the singles album came out, which I can mind as well, which at that time, as we say, like with these indie anthems and Shine and all that, all the bands had so many good singles, so all used bands releasing singles collections they were brilliant albums in themselves, because you did have so much a catalogue to choose from. But after that, after the singles album, Luxembourg came out, and then there seemed to be a decline then, obviously, in chart success.
Yeah.
So for having 3 top 10 albums to then kind of watching yourself slowly deteriorate in a chart sense of the word. But obviously, I mean, you
were deteriorating in a mental sense as well.
Yeah. how has it well, that's what I was going to touch on. How is that then to take seeing kind of the music waning?
I think sometimes very few artists are able to sort of maintain that high level of success. There's not many stories where they have. When you're on the top table for your whole career. Yeah. And we just took it all in our stride, really. We recognized the fact that we'd been in fashion, and the only thing that's guaranteed when you're in fashion is that pretty soon you're going to be out again. And this was like, well, let's just keep making good records, and then hopefully, we'll be evaluated on our own terms instead of as part of something which is now seen as quite passé and a bit dead. But by whom? But so
yeah. So, but you've obviously to continue making records, then you've kept like a hardcore fans in that will have followed you throughout your career. After the singles album, I'll be honest and say I probably went in a different musical direction. Obviously,
a lot of people did.
Yeah, the podcast called Time for Heroes. So, I mean,
the Libertines came into your life
and all that, and then I kind of went in that direction. But like looking at your stuff, obviously, the self-titled album, the Bluetones, failed to chart, and then was you went to what you call it, cooking vinyl, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
But did you have was there still some albums to release on a record deal? Because obviously there's all these like compilations that come out, a rough outline come out, B-sides and singles.
Yeah, that was collecting all the B-sides and everything into one place. Because I think the singles album had come out, but some of those singles had like 4 B-sides. You had the double format CDs, didn't you, with 2 different B-sides on each one?
Because there just seemed to be so much. Obviously, 2006 rough outline, then the self-titled album, then 2007 the radio sessions, which the BBC radio sessions, the albums are always brilliant because you always get hidden gems in there. But you had that, then you had the live album, and then the early years. All these out in 2007.
Yeah. So, I think that was tied up with the cooking vinyl deal. They had first dibs on that stuff.
Right.
It was a 1 album firm deal with first dibs on these demos and unreleased tracks. It was one of those.
So, like, then the year after that, we got your solo record. So, what was the?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, what was the thinking behind that? When did you decide?
Well, it was a point. There was a distinct point after we'd been touring where Ed's and Adam were about to become parents again, and it was decided let's have a natural break from touring so everyone can sort of settle down into this new thing. Because until that we'd just been carefree, as it were, but now we got responsibilities. And I got approached by an independent label, and they said we'd be interested in putting out a solo album if you ever thought about it. And I hadn't thought about it. And so I did. I said, okay. And they gave me a sort of modest budget. And I recorded it with Gordon, who I've recorded everything with since. And he's produced 2 Bluetones albums as well. He did Luxembourg and A New Athens. And he's done all of my solo albums. And he's done things like he recorded After Hours as well, years ago. I think that's when we first met him. So 2000. So I've known him 22 years. And so I just thought, okay, yeah, that's a nice idea. I've got some songs that are going to be hanging around. And I had 3 or 4 in my pocket anyway. And I thought, okay, I just need another 5 or 6 songs. So yeah, I'll do this. And let's just see where it goes. And the rest of the band said, yeah, great idea. And I got them to play on it, of course. And it was just an aside, really, just so I had something to do. And having been in, like I said earlier, having been in this collaborative group for so long, it was a nice challenge to be in charge, you know. You know? So okay, I can say what goes, if you know what I mean. So I've got editorial, veto on this, which I thought that'd be fun, and I just enjoyed being in the studio and playing around, and it doesn't time just whizzes by when you're in the studio. It's you haven't. I really love that process.
Then going forward, then like going back to like a couple of years later, then you make a new Bluetones record. How does that feel then going back to that? Like you've had this control and now you're going back to the band dynamic.
That was great. That
Was
was fine. It's absolutely fine. It was. There was no push. There's never really been any uncomfortable push and pull between the band members when it comes to that sort of thing. There's no one trying to stamp their mark too firmly. People have strong ideas, but if they're not working, they don't work. If someone's got a better idea, and it's usually very evident. But no, there's no. I mean, people have said this just before. When we recorded an EP in 2005 called Serenity Now, and we worked with this guy called Darius, who'd been our front of house guy, and he's like a dance house producer, and he hadn't had that much experience working with bands before. But we went up to this studio for a week or 5 days and recorded 4 songs. And during the mixing process, he would like call us in individually, or we'd go wander in individually, because it takes bloody hours, and you don't spend hours in the room because it drives you nuts. That's why you pay these guys. And he'd play something to us, and we'd give an opinion, and then leave. And then I was like, for example, I'd go in and say, "Oof, bass sounds a bit quiet," and he'd go, "Okay, all right, bear that in mind." And then Adam would come in half an hour later and listen to it and go, bass sounds a bit quiet. We'd all say the same thing. Or what are those? Well, what are those sprinkly things you put over the hi-hats? Yeah, I don't like those. Don't like, what do the others say? No, they don't like it either. So we'd always be on the same page. We talk about things a lot when we're making them, when we're arranging the songs. We use references for different passages of songs. Like, we want it to sound like this, and it goes a bit here. So you got all this noise and then nothing, that sort of thing. And everyone's on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not making it very clear. I'm making it sound really dumb. I know, but it's difficult
No, it's totally different for, like, obviously one of the bands that I've been into, obviously Libertines era, and being Scottish, I've been a fan of The View.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously they broke up 2017 or something, whatever, and then Kyle went and done 2 solo records, and then they're back together, like this album coming out, but the looks just like, it doesn't look as if it's the same kind of effort. I've listened to the new album, obviously it's not yet, but there's a good few songs that look like they could be Kyle Faulkner solo songs.
Right.
And it looks to me as if this album will come out and then that'll be it, and then it'll be back to Kyle. So obviously what you're saying is then you were able to fit back in quite easily. It's the dynamic of the band hadn't changed any in those couple of years away.
No, not at all. I'd missed that thing of having their demos to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
I'd missed that thing of, because Adam and Scott have always got some good ideas, and everyone's got their slightly different style of writing. Certainly at the demo stage, or things are presented in a way that's, you can tell whose it is at that stage.
Uh-huh.
And I had missed that, and I really got a kick out of doing that again. And then, in fact, Adam and I drove down to Cornwall for 5 days, just with the intention of finishing off all of these songs, because Scott songs as well, because he wasn't around. He was living I think he was already living in. He was living in Scotland at the time. He was living in Edinburgh at the time, and we'd rehearsed these songs, but they needed something else. They needed just a little bit of finishing off before we did the final pre-production rehearsal and start recording. And I remember thinking how much I really enjoyed the team feeling, even if when it was just him and I, of just not. I like doing it on my own, but it's just a real, there's sparks happen when there's someone else there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, there's no ego in our band, really. There's no one in charge. I might sometimes be viewed as like the spokesperson, but it's not to say that I'm speaking for myself,
Yeah. I mean, that's naturally going to come, being the front man, being the singer. You're going to be kind of labelled as that. Obviously, the new album came out, A New Athens. Who I read about that failed to chart as well, did it?
Yeah, well, that was a whole mess. It was a really odd time. Between 2006 and 2010, when that came out, was a kind of a fairly odd time for us behind the scenes, which is why we took like that decision in 2011. We were to call it a day.
Mm-hmm.
In 2006, we were embezzled. Well, we'd found out that had been embezzled and had been for some time by our manager, the one I mentioned before, to the tune of quite a lot of money. And we were on the eve. When I say the eve, it was the day before we were due to fly out to New York to start a North American tour, which was then going to go across to Japan and New Zealand and then back home, like a round the world ticket, and then back home. But we discovered that none of the flights had been paid for, none of the hotels had been booked, and all of the deposits had been received and spent. And all this money we'd been squirreling away to pay for the flights and pay for the hotels had just been squandered. And he just sent us all a text message basically saying goodbye. And so there we were. When we were up in Scotland at the time, I can't remember the name of the town. It was the one. Where did they invent lace?
I'm not sure.
Stirling
or Perth? I'm not sure.
Oh, so it was there anyway. We were there to play a gig. And so that was a bit of a kick in the teeth for the band collectively, because not only was all this, we thought we were going to New York the next day.
Yeah.
But we had huge debts. Our tax bills hadn't been paid for years, even though we'd given all the money over, it had been taken out of our accounts, etc. It was such a trusting relationship. So we basically had to do a UK tour and a European tour, knowing that we weren't going to make a single penny from it, because it was just covering debts from the studios we'd used, the rehearsal spaces we'd used, the people that were driving us around. Our crew hadn't been paid, so you got to sort all those things out. Otherwise, you're fucked. Everyone just thinks that you're a crook.
Yeah.
You can't walk away from debt like that. And so we spent a few years doing that. We got picked up by this other management company, and they were very enthusiastic. They said all the right things. They had great facilities. They had a studio that we could use and stay at. It was on a farm. They were already managing, successful acts. And I don't think that I think that they thought that we were some sort of cash cow that they could just jump on the back of, And at that time, we needed a little bit of work, because Britpop was a dirty word, and the scene that we'd been associated with was a dirty word. And we recorded A New Athens, and there was some interest from a major label. I think it was Mercury at that time, Mercury Records. It was one of the Universal labels. And our management put all their eggs in one basket and said, we're going to sell this record to Mercury. We're going to get X amount of money. They want to promote it around the world. It's all back on, lads. But at the last minute, the record deal fell through, and we just had this record that was finished. We had artwork for it, and they just sort of shoved it out through the back door on their own in-house label, which was already a conflict of interests. You can't have your management running your label. But we had a tour booked, and we had nothing to promote. So it came out like that, didn't chart, didn't sell very many copies. And after that experience, and we'd felt very let down, it was difficult to sort of keep picking ourselves up and dusting ourselves off again. It felt like we've had 5 years of it. So we decided to put our baby away rather than see it get kicked around anymore. Mm-hmm. And then we disbanded, and that was going to be it. And it was it for a while. We didn't part on bad terms. We parted on the best terms possible. You know, within the group, it was a collective decision. And
it happened so much. So didn't you hear these stories when the music industry, management fucking trap up their bands and whatever? Obviously, like the Stone Roses had the
it
used to be a common story. I mean, you made another solo album, or you made A Flash of Darkness 2014.
Yeah.
Then you brought out the covers album, but I mean, how do you go in? I mean, how are you able to trust people after something like that? It must be so hard to put your trust in management and
it is. It's been difficult to give the reins back fully to anybody since then. We've taken on more responsibility ourselves with regards to our finances, for starts, and the people we let close to us now, in terms of who is going to manage us, as it were, or not advise. Yeah, but I don't think you can let it destroy your faith in humanity. A few bad experiences, you won't be taken for a fool again, but there has to be trust. But maybe it has to be earned a little bit more. Or someone has to go a little bit further to earn it these days, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to get cynical, for God's sakes. Otherwise, you just get out of the game altogether. And that's what happened to us in 2011. We were becoming cynical.
So obviously, I mentioned the covers album, the Taste of Mark Morris, which I was listening to it last night at work. Brilliant album, brilliant musically. I don't know any of the songs.
Oh, really?
No, like I've never heard any songs, but it was brilliant. So,
thanks.
Who are some of the people you covered in that album? Because
what is that? Pet Shop Boys are on there,
right? So you
Buffalo
could
Springfield.
type of music to.
Yeah, it was. The thing was, I'd done A Flash of Darkness, and I'd hit a bit of a sort of beige patch in terms of writing, and I hadn't written enough songs to go back into the studio to do another record. And Acid Jazz were interested in putting out another record, so I suggested and I really just wanted to get back in the studios. Like I said earlier, I felt like I was getting rusty, and I found the process of deconstructing other people's songs and then putting them back together, seeing how they work, seeing all the parts, and going, oh, that's fairly simple, really. It really helped me. It greased the wheels for my own creativity again. So I did that album, and then I had a bunch of songs of my own almost raring to go. Well, not a few months later. It's kind of difficult to explain. I tried to turn like a creative slump into something that was fun and productive, because it really just got me into the studio and got me back into the process.
It's looking at it from a different viewpoint as well, isn't it? Obviously, Paul Weller did like a covers album, Studio 150.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, again, don't get me wrong, there was a few songs on that I knew, but again, there was some songs that I wasn't aware of, and then got me into listening to going back and listening to the artists through Paul Weller. So that I'm going to go back and search out these songs and find the originals and have a listen to them as well. I think that's what I might do tonight at work.
Oh, you might be surprised. You might be surprised. Some of them are sort of. There's a Madonna song on there. There's a Laura Branigan song on there.
I had one of my previous guests pretty early on my podcast was Chris Helm.
Oh yeah.
And I think initially after speaking to him, I think I tried to contact you then about the podcast through some management company. It's really hard to get guests booking them through management. Management are murder at getting back to you. So I've come up with these new routes of getting my guests. But obviously he mentioned, and you mentioned earlier about Dodgy as well, and he mentioned that he's did some solo shows. Chris Helm, yourself, and Nigel Clark. So how was that then, going back out and tour with these guys?
Yeah. That was great fun. I've known, like I say, I've known Nigel for a very long time, 30 years, let's say. And I've been working with Chris since about 2010, 2011, and doing a lot of gigs with him. So it was just good fun, and it was nice to sort of share the load. Because it can be quite a lonely furrow, this one that we plough as solo performers. So that was just good fun, and and we were starting to write some songs together as well, and thinking about a collaboration, but that didn't get off the ground.
He's a funny guy, Chris. When I did that interview, obviously I was, as I say, it was pretty early on in the podcast, and I think maybe like episode 5 or something. And I can mind start the interview in the first 10 minutes. I thought, I don't know if I like this guy. I don't know if I can carry this interview on. Cut to 2.5 hours later, 11:30 at night. I was like, look, I really need to go. I've not had my dinner or anything. I couldn't get him off. He was brilliant. He was brilliant.
Was he drinking red wine?
I think he was, yeah. He's quite eccentric, isn't he, Chris?
He's sorry?
He's quite eccentric.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but
yeah, he's got his
never have thought of like the
modes.
But I
think he can sometimes be a little bit guarded, but again, I think he's had his fingers burnt as well. So perhaps that's.
Well, I think that's maybe how the interview started. He seemed quite kind of. He didn't
suspicious.
Aye, but as the interview went on, he opened up, and it was I couldn't get rid of him. It was a brilliant night. Yeah,
that sounds about right. Yeah, he's a good conversationalist.
You've had a couple of other projects. Obviously, I've noticed the Maples with Mark Berry.
Oh yeah, that's right. That was God, that's like 10 years ago now. Gee whiz, yeah, that was good fun. I that came about because I met Matt at a comedy night. We were a mutual friend was doing a little sketch show, and they were trying it out in this room above a pub before they took it to Edinburgh. And I met him there, and we got talking, and then he contacted me. I think he must have got my number from somebody, another mutual friend, because he was doing a radio show at the time on
XFM.
That wasn't XFM, it's the other one. Oh, blimey. The one that's got 90s and 80s categories.
Absolute, that's it.
Absolute, that's it. Yeah, he was doing it in the early days of Absolute Radio. And he had like a Saturday night, and I think he needed a guest, so he got me on the show. And we just started hanging out after that. And then I was doing my sort of solo acoustic gigs, and I've not been doing them for like terribly long time at that point. And he wanted a bit of the action. He's like, that looks like fun. So we went out together as we were called the Swedish Twins. And we did sort of a dozen or so gigs together, and And then when Kill the Wolf was ready, and then he invited me in to do some backing vocals on Kill the Wolf when he was recording it. And then I'd always said to him, listen, if you need a rhythm guitarist in that band of yours, just give me the call, you know. And when he came to tour Kill the Wolf, he said, you fancy coming along and playing rhythm guitar with the band? And I jumped at the chance, because I thought the idea of going on tour and not being the main focus, as it were, you know, the singer, or just being able to groove away in the shadows, was very appealing.
Yeah.
And his band are real top draw musicians as well. And so I felt like I was learning every day and getting better just by playing with them. And so that's how that evolved, really. And then so I was a maypole right until we've not played for a few years because he's too busy.
Mm-hmm.
He's too busy now. He's a international sensation.
So before we go into your heroes, because we're touching towards the end, just what's coming up for you in the future? What's going on with the Bluetones? Is there going to be a new album or anything like that, new music?
Well, yeah, 2 weeks from tomorrow, we're getting together. Is it 2 weeks from tomorrow? No, it's 2 weeks from yesterday. I beg your pardon. We're getting together. We've got 3 shows, so that'll take us probably about 3 or 4 hours to rehearse a set for that. So we've got another few days where we can just mess about. So we're going to be exchanging ideas, and I've got a handful of songs I'm going to share with the band. Scott's sent some demos over. Adam's been playing me some songs. So we're going to spend a bit of time and seeing if we've got anything, you know. And if we have, I think we'd like to do some more recording. I certainly hope that's the case. But that's the plan, and that's in a couple of weeks. And then at the end of the year, we're getting together again in October to do a tour. We're playing the whole of the second album.
Right.
That's the plan.
Have you got dates announced or anything for that?
Yeah. It starts mid-October. Let me just check my diary. Hang on. When's the first one? Diddly do. Norwich on the 12th of October.
Right.
And it winds up, and we're in Norwich. We're in Glasgow the day after my birthday, which could be interesting.
Right.
And it ends on the 27th in Brighton.
I'll have a look at that then. That'll be nice. Obviously, that second album.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge, man. Some of those songs we've not played for a very long time.
What's the script? Are you playing it in its entirety? And
yeah,
exactly.
I'm going to play it from beginning to end, and then come back out and do a bit of a greatest hits collage at the end.
Oh, that sounds good. Definitely sounds good. I'll be up for that.
Yeah, drop us a note.
Where
are you living then? Are you up in?
I'm just outside Glasgow.
Oh, you come to the Glasgow gig then? I'll sort it out.
We'll try and rope in my pal and see if we can stay with each other the full gig.
Yeah, put Apple tags on each other.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, I'll be well up for that. At the end of the podcast, obviously, we've been called Time for Heroes. I asked my guests to pick 4 heroes to come for dinner. Why are they your heroes? And what would you cook them as well?
That's a good one. 4 heroes for dinner.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, I'm no strict on the amount of guests, because people give honorary mentions and whatever. Some people can't narrow it down to 4. So if you want to have more than 4, I'm not that strict on it. We're coming up to episode 50, and I'm looking at compiling like a league table of all these people that have been picked throughout the 50 episodes.
So what's the average number of people that people have been choosing?
You get a few people stick to it. I mean, I had Gemma Clark for Baby Shambles. She picked about 15 different people.
That's a lot. That's a lot of catering.
Yeah.
Well, heroes. Who would you like to have to dinner? Well, Christopher Hitchin, you know him?
I've heard him. Yeah,
He's a writer journalist. He passed
yeah.
away about 12, 13 years ago, actually. He's someone I think would be fascinating to have around the dinner table because he seems to be able to talk on a great number of subjects with some panache. I'd like to pick his brains. The world's certainly a less inquisitive place without him in it.
Yeah.
So that's the hitch. See, I would invite Chrissy Hine, but then I'd have to make it all vegetarian, otherwise she'd do her nut. Because she's quite militant. So everyone would have to have salad because Chrissy's here. Because I couldn't just do a separate salad, could I? Because she would be annoyed that we're all having spaghetti bolognese. Who else would I like to invite? So I'll tell you who I think would be a good guest, and this is Zlatan, the only.
Right.
I'm fascinated by him. I think he's a very. I think he's an interesting guy. I don't know how seriously he takes himself. I think he's having a real laugh at us.
You think?
Or the media.
I think he's so focused on he believes so much in his ability. I mean, some of the things he's done as well, but like mind that overhead kick.
Yeah.
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 That was a friendly.
I think he scored 4 goals that night, didn't he?
Yeah. Was that a friendly though as well? I think
yeah.
Because you're going about that mind the England Colombia, the scorpion kick.
Yeah.
And
what's his name? Rene Higuita.
But they always throw that back at him as well. That but it was a friendly. You wouldn't have done that in a real game. And they say the same thing about Zlatan. But I mean, the guy's a fair age as well. I think he's still.
He's 40 now. I think he's just retired. I loved it. I saw his retirement thing when he gave his speech, and it was at the San Siro, and the away fans were booing. he addressed the away fans directly. He said, "You don't realise you're in the presence of greatness. you may be booing me now, but you'll be telling everyone you were here for the rest of your life." I love him.
Yeah, and here he could go as well. He doesn't take any shit.
No, he bears a grudge, doesn't he?
Yeah.
What's that?
A few run-ins with that Lukaku as well at Inter.
Yeah. And what's the name of that defender? The one that got headbutted by Zidane.
Materazzi.
Yeah, he had a famous run in with him, didn't he? I think he waited 3 seasons to get his own back and pretty much cut him in half. Yeah, I like him. I know he's got a bad side, but that's sport.
That's the last guest I had picked Bruce Lee, so that's like 2 weeks in a row. I've had some sort of kung fu reference.
Was everybody really kung fu fighting? So that's 2. That's 3. And I will have Chrissy Hine there. We will have salad. I don't want to upset her. I did meet her once a long, long time ago. It was backstage or after an after party. I think there'd been like an Enemy Awards or something. And I think we'd had 1 single out or maybe 2 singles out. And I was talking to her backstage, and she was good friends with that boxer Michael Watson, the one that was hospitalised and since had his difficulties after a fight with Nigel. Was it Chris Eubank or Nigel Benn? One of the 2. Can't remember that detail. But I remember speaking to her for what seemed like the longest time, just talking about boxing, and she obviously knew her stuff.
Boxing, yeah.
She certainly was around then, and she knew far more than I did.
Right.
But she just seemed like such an open person, talking to us kids, Yeah. She didn't know who the hell we were from Adam, and so I think she'd be good company.
She does seem to still be held in high regard, and she's got such influence. Like watching them at Glastonbury the other week as well, and
she commanded it. She was brilliant. And those songs, those classics are just like beacons of light, And on a day full of music, those songs still stand head and shoulders above most things there.
Yeah.
I don't often watch the Glastonbury stuff because I'm usually away working, but I was home that weekend, and the sun was shining. And I watched most of it in my garden on the iPad with a gin and tonic and a doobie on the go. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the BBC coverage, because I'm usually quite sort of down on Glastonbury. I think, why does it get such a free ride? It's like the BBC just turns into a big advert for Glastonbury for like a month leading up to it.
Yeah.
And it seems a little, a little unfair on all the other great festivals we have in this nation.
It's handy. I like it for a Saturday night. I mean, even at the weekend there, I just put the iPlayer on and just sat with the missus and just we were watching old ones. I think last at the weekend there we watched Glastonbury 2013, just on that. So it's nice to just kind of stick that on the telly and sit and get a drink or whatever.
I did enjoy it. Yeah, I must admit, I did enjoy it. It was a very pleasurable weekend. I didn't want to end. Sunday night was like, oh.
Yeah.
I watched Queens of the Stone Age now because, I watched the Elton John one live. It felt like it was significant. And then I watched Queens of the Stone Age the next day, and they were amazing.
Yeah, I only watched Arctic Monkeys the other night there as well. Yeah. I mean, they get a hard time for their sets as well.
Don't understand why. I thought it sounded brilliant from where I was.
Yeah, I thought it was immaculate. People don't want the band to evolve though. That they just want to hear the sound of the first album.
Yes, yeah, do they? Or just the loud ones?
Yeah, I mean it's happened again up here. Scottish boy Paolo Nutini, he played Transmit last year, and again, like, that guy's music has evolved so much in the 10, 15 years he's been at that he can't play the first album the way the fans want him to, because he wants to play it a different way, which I understand. I love it. I love hearing it in a different aspect, but you get it's the younger fans. They just want to hear.
Play the record. Play the CD. Yeah, you're right. I know. He's great, Paolo Nutini. I've got a little story I can tell you about Paolo, my connection to Paolo. A few years ago, I think it was 2010, I was invited onto the panel at the Ivor Novellos to be select the album of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And it was over 2 days, which were kind of like about a month apart. And so you start with like 60 albums, you whittle it down to a list of 10 or 12, and then you come back and you debate which 3 you think, one winner and 2 for consideration. And I thought Paolo Nutini won it that year for his second album. What's it called? One with Pencil Full of... Sorry?
Is it the one that had Candy on it?
Yeah, one with Candy on it. And I think that got album of the year. Dizzy Rascal got second, and third was Duckworth Lewis Method, which I was a big fan of. And I was like Henry Fonda in 12 Angry Men, getting that album into the final 3. I wasn't going to budge. But I'm proud to say I had a part in Paolo Nutini winning the Ivor Novello for that album. I was on the panel that year, and it's an outstanding record.
If I ever get him on the podcast, I'll mention that he owes you.
He owes me
Yeah. So we've got Christopher Hitchens, Chrissy
Zlatan, that's right. See, normally, I would consider Neil Young to be one of my heroes. Certainly musically. I mean, he's such a changing man over his long career. He's been so many different things in terms of things he comes out with. But I've just, not that long ago, I read his most recent autobiography, which is read by Powers Booth, which does help. And let me tell you, it is a boring read. So despite the fact that he is certainly a hero of mine, I would not have him at the dinner party. I feel like he'd want to just talk about his train set or this new digital amplifier that he's developing for cars. You know, there's a lot of that in the book. So I'm not going to have Neil Young. Who would I have as a good? Rick Mail would be a good guest to have, and certainly a hero. Certainly
Right.
someone who wouldn't let the conversation dry up. And another one of those people is like, I think the world really misses his voice in it.
Yeah.
Not that he was like a spokesperson for anybody or anything other than himself, or maybe Spitfire beer. But you know,
It's always nice to have somebody like a comedian of some sort as well, because they would light
yes,
up the room.
the light and everything every now and again, just to pop everyone's balloon. Think of all the egos at this table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if Zlatan would get Rick Mail's
A lot
sense.
of Rick's humour, but it'd be interesting to watch it, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Watch the process.
and they're going to have salad, are we?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I
I
don't
think
think Rick
again,
Mail will be too happy with that.
I think Zlatan would be happy with that as well. He likes to look after himself, doesn't he?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, he might let himself go now that he's retired.
Yeah.
He might get super big. He's gonna be the biggest ex-footballer there ever was.
Yeah, I mean, a great bunch of people. I don't know what's happened, obviously. I don't know, again, as I mentioned off mic, Stuart Robertson that's been getting me these guests
Yeah.
the last few weeks. The heroes that these guests have been picking, it's been so varied. So that might all be down to Stuart Robertson picking me a better calibre of guest. It's been an absolute pleasure, man. They're a great bunch of folk to come for dinner.
That'll do, won't it?
Yeah,
That'll keep things ticking over.
yeah. So, absolute pleasure having you on the day, Mark.
Well,
Um,
likewise, look at us. The time's gone whiz by. That's like an hour and a half we've been chatting here.
yeah, I'll get dinner to make, and then that's me
Oh,
work again to listen to all these listen to these bands for the cover album. That's what I'm going to do tonight.
oh yeah, that's some homework for you.
Yeah, but absolute pleasure having you on. Good luck with the tour coming up.
Yeah.
Post links and all that in the description. I'll tag you in all the stuff, and I'll post all your links so that people can get to you. But absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you very much for
Nice
taking.
to talk to you.
Brilliant.
And listen, I'll stick you with a +1 for the 19th of October.
Brilliant, mate.
I'll do it now. Stick it in my diary now.
Brilliant. Pleasure having you on.
Pleasure's all mine, sir. See you soon.
Cheers, mate. I hope you all enjoyed this episode of Time for Heroes podcast. If you would like to get in touch, the best way is on the Facebook page, Time for Heroes podcast, or on Instagram at Time for Heroes podcast, or Twitter at Time for Heroes P1, or drop me an email at timeforheroespod@gmail.com. You'll find Time for Heroes on all podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple, Google, and Amazon. Please leave a review where you can, share with others, and more importantly, enjoy.